Breaking now, hurricane watch is now out for much of the state of Florida, and it stands to reason why with the latest update.
Latest update from the National Hurricane Center. Winds of 175 miles per hour, still a Category 5 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. That's as high a category as you can get. Pressure steady at 921. Moving steadily west-northwest at 16 miles per hour. About ready to head into the Turks and Caicos Islands there with ferocious, destructive winds and significant storm surge.
Do you see anything in the way that could be the kryptonite for this that could weaken this, or is this going to be more of the same, this momentum that's been built up?
I don't see a significant change, like a rapid reduction in intensity anytime soon, Reynolds. It's moving in an atmosphere that's allowing it to breathe. It's moving over very warm water that's giving it plenty of fuel. So there's a lot of reason to think that the intensity is not going to change much for the next couple of days as it gets closer and closer to Florida. Now, as it gets up to these latitudes, there's a couple of competing factors. It may weaken a little bit because of some stronger winds aloft, some wind shear, but it's also got warmer waters to work with over here. So we just don't know yet. But regardless, prepare for either a Cat 4 or Cat 5 hurricane, very close, if not making landfall in Florida over the weekend.
Unreal. So, again, we see this thing tap dancing its way through the islands, already left so much damage in other places. What is the biggest threat that we have with this? Is the storm surge potential?
Storm surge is a significant issue in South Florida. In fact, the worst case scenario for South Florida in terms of storm surge is a northward moving hurricane at a reasonable clip. Unfortunately, that meets what we expect with Hurricane Irma. So exactly what the inundation levels, we just don't know yet. We'll be running some of those models later on today, and we'll show you all about that coming in the later updates. But the wind is going to be a significant issue. There's a tendency to fall asleep on that, like it's all about the water. It is not all about the water. Destructive winds will probably be moving up and down or up the Florida Peninsula during the weekend, enough to do significant damage throughout the state.
You know, a short while ago, the governor had mentioned that one of his big fears that if you have any of these bridges that connect the Keys together, everyone that happens to be south of that point is isolated.
Yeah.
They're stuck out there.
Absolutely.
And you think about what we have right now, the hurricane watch, by the way, again, that's our breaking news. Notice we have it decorating much of South Florida at this point, and also parts of the interior near Lake Okeechobee.
Yeah, and there's no reason to think that those hurricane watches will not get extended farther to the north. It's just a matter of time. You know that's coming. Based on everything we've seen, it is coming your way. So watch out. The possibility of 75-mile-per-hour wind gusts does exist all the way from South Florida. I would argue that depending on the track, that may all the way go to the west coast of Florida too. Gusts, not sustained winds, but gusts. But that's enough to do damage. And also Georgia, South Carolina as well, and maybe even North Carolina, depending on where Irma ends up later on the weekend and early next week, Reynolds.
Well, you know, when you have those widespread power outages, this is the component that forces so much that to happen. It's usually the wind component.
Yeah.
And you take a look at when we can first expect some of those tropical storm winds, the earliest expected arrivals. Very interesting to see this step by step over the next several days.
Now, these are very helpful maps produced by the National Hurricane Center because they give you an idea of the earliest expected arrival of tropical storm force winds, which is about the wind that you really don't want to be moving around in, and you want to absolutely have all your preparations done. So, for example, Miami, South Florida, 8 a.m. on Saturday morning, there is a chance that there are tropical storm force winds sustained 40 and above, which would mean gusts 50, 60, 70. That arrives on Saturday morning and then steadily moves up the Florida Peninsula during the morning on Sunday, maybe closing in on Jacksonville, Florida, interior sections of southeast Georgia as well. I'm not going to leave you guys out of the picture because late in the weekend and early next week, hurricane force winds may be very close to you as well.
What's crazy about this, too, is that I think so many times we have the tendency just to watch the eye.
Yes.
We watch the eye, but so many of these winds, some of the strong winds are going to be well ahead of it. Some of the earlier features that we'll deal with this system.
That's right. Right now, the hurricane force winds, guys, if we could put up a satellite picture of Irma, a recent one, this would be great because the reconnaissance has been in there all morning long, and they found that the hurricane force winds extend outward about 60 miles from the center. So really, right at the leading edge of this sort of magenta colored cloud is about where the hurricane force, the leading edge of them are right now. But here's the thing, you might not think, okay, that's not very much, but the winds rapidly increase from here on inward toward the eye and get into that Category 5 range. They actually did sample Category 5 winds right here in the northern eye wall with winds at about 1,000 feet above the ground near 200 miles per hour.
I had to ask you, and this is, I apologize, this is a bit of a departure, but what is the thing that is making this engine so strong? Is it the warm water? Is it the lack of shear? Is it both?
It's both, and the fact that this was a well-organized circulation from the beginning. It had the DNA to allow it to continue onward. It sort of isolated, it insulated itself from harmful surroundings. When it was way back in the Atlantic, it was already a powerful storm, and it just had really good genes, unfortunately. Call it bad genes, what you want. But let's talk about what's going on with the Cohen-Reynolds, because we do expect the hurricane to take that northward turn in here later on Saturday and Sunday, and that puts Florida in the crosshairs.
Well, for heaven's sakes, even on Tuesday morning, sustained winds at 60 miles an hour possible going all the way into the interior. I'm thinking even heavy rain, high elevation orographic lift could have a flooding situation there possibly.
Could have flooding and damaging winds, bringing lots of trees down all across interior Georgia, South Carolina as well. And unfortunately, Florida, you're going to have destructive winds likely for much of the peninsula.
Okay, Doug Brazil. Folks, you're watching Hurricane Irma coverage. We'll have more coming up.
Live from the Weather Channel headquarters in Atlanta, you're